not the best test taker, full disclosure.
Okay.
I was definitely below the average for most of the schools that I applied to.
Right. I think there's a perception that like everyone must go to Harvard to get into Harvard. Ultimately, it's outcomes and impact.
They're like, tell me about this one thing that you did when you were 10 years old that you mentioned this one sentence in your application.
Right.
It needs to be real. I got into both GSB and HBS, and I had that decision up close and personal. I mean, it kind of became, do I want to do this now or never? The section, it's its own community in itself, but I don't think I fully expected to get the level of depth of friendships that I have.
What does it take to get into arguably the best business school in the world, Harvard Business School? Once you get in, does it live up to those high expectations? Today, we're chatting with a really impressive applicant, now student, and now in his second year at HBS, he's representing his class as student body president. Welcome, Hayden, to the MBA Mission podcast. If I understand this correctly, you are the HBS co-president of the Student Senate.
That is
right?
true. Yeah.
I was formerly the co-president of the MIT Sloan Student Senate. So let's arm wrestle.
We have to. At this
we
point, we have to. I mean, it's a competition for the city of Boston.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You got to do it.
I think that's right. So let me ask you, obviously the HBS Student Senate very focused on things that are happening outside of the classroom. How's it manifested when all said and done?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Part of the reason why I chose HBS specifically was because of the co-curricular environment. I just thought it would be a great place for me to fulfill all the types of things I did. For example, in undergrad, I had such a meaningful experience there because of the types of things that happened outside of the classroom.
Right.
And so when I think back on my past, I was student body president in high school. I was student body president of my undergrad. Shout out to Loyola Marymount University.
Okay, fantastic.
And then now I'm student body president at HBS. And I think I have always been a student government kid. Love the types of roles where you're able to build inclusive communities for other people.
Right.
And I think that the MBA program is no different. So I knew that whatever program I wanted to go to, I wanted to pursue student government.
And it is a fairly large community.
It is.
It's like 2,000 people.
Yep.
All with obviously 2,000 people, many of whom are not shy in terms of saying what they want, what they don't
That's
want.
very true.
So I'm sure there's a lot of sort of juggling.
And is your inbox full of requests constantly? Are people like, so, you're running this big organization? I think we talked about it before, but $1.5 million budget.
Yeah.
Are you customer service for 2,000 people?
Yeah. So I think the interesting thing about this student government role compared to one in undergrad, for example, like student government, yes, advocate for change, advocate for your classmates, add more chicken in the dining hall, things like that.
Absolutely.
You totally get those types of requests.
Absolutely.
But now we run a campus store where we generate revenue, we have COGS, we have overhead, things to actually pay for, salaries to pay.
Right.
Not my own, to be crystal. I do not make any money for this. Let's be very honest.
Yes.
But that's where our budget comes from. We're actually applying the things that we're learning in the classroom about budgeting, forecasting cash flows, the types of things that go into that. So work very closely with my CFO, Molly, on doing those types of things.
Listen, when I was at MIT Sloan, I always thought MIT Sloan students should be running our cafeteria, that we actually should be running our cafeteria.
Apply what you're learning.
Exactly. And also it's like, what great experience.
I think so.
Market, employees, or like you said, COGS, everything about it. But I interrupt.
It's like it is a real business. I mean, you look at our tax forms online, I'll be listed as CEO right there.
Yeah.
Deeply honored for that.
Yeah,
but you do learn about the types of things that people care about. And I think especially at a school like HBS, where the student population for MBAs at least is a little less than 2,000 between the two classes.
Yeah.
I mean, you see these people around you every single day. 2000, I think people talk about, wow, HBS has such a big class. It's not that big.
Right.
Like you run into your classmates constantly. People are asking you questions constantly.
Right.
You always get a WhatsApp or an iMessage or an email asking for something that you've probably sent out 1,000 times. But you'll
of course.
Because you know them personally.
Yes.
So I always like to say that at a school like HBS, a few people can be the nucleus of a community.
Okay.
And I think that this role is inherently that. To your point, one thing I've gotten really good at is saying no when people ask for money. I think that's actually one thing that I've gotten really good at.
Right.
And I think that that's just on consistency and wanting to keep money for our greatest priorities. And my co-president, Taylor, and I were very clear that we wanted to do things in this role with our money that benefit the greatest number of students.
Yes.
That traditionally goes to larger events like our galas, which 90+% of the student body goes to,
Right.
and other initiatives like that.
Yeah.
This year we got students free coffee and free printing, which we're really excited about.
Yeah, which is
But
actually
we're also
impactful.
We're also paying for that too.
Right.
I mean, but that's just business. That's how it goes. And we have to generate the cash to do that. And we've been successful at doing that.
That's great. Let's just take a step back, because I think you had a really interesting career up until business school. You yourself had let's say, a very successful application process.
Yeah, well, maybe we can focus on that, because Hayden and I were talking earlier. I think he's got the record in terms of any applicant I've seen in the last 24 years.
To be clear, I did ask who held the record, because do I want the record selfishly? Probably. Who wouldn't want that record?
Right. That's right.
11 for 11
I did.
with scholarships at how many? At 6.
At 6,
Yeah.
fantastic.
We're very proud of Hayden.
Right.
And
And let's put a shout out in here for our colleague Krista, who worked very closely with you.
Kristen Annery.
Yeah.
Hit her up. She deserves all the love.
she really does.
Absolutely.
So devoted. Such a calling for her. I think she'd be deeply honored to hear you say that.
No, I love her.
She's a wonderful person.
Yeah,
really devoted. But it takes. I would say it takes two. But obviously, though, you had to live that life, and we have to give the credit to you. If you want to be one of our success stories, sign up for a free consultation with a member of our full-time MBA admissions team. Since we've worked with tens of thousands of applicants over the past 2 decades, we can give you our honest opinion on your chances and help you put together your very best application. That is not a sales call, but rather your first session with one of us for free. We can give you a profile evaluation, answer specific questions about the process, review your resume, talk about your school choices, and so much more. Sign up at mbaMission.com/consult. We look forward to working with you. Let's get into your background. So you're a West Coast guy.
I'm a West Coast boy, born and raised in Los Angeles, and then grew up. I chose to go to Loyola Marymount University,
Which again
LMU.
is out in Los Angeles.
It's in Los Angeles. Yeah. And definitely for all intents and purposes for an MBA program like HBS, pretty non-target.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
It really is.
Right.
And so I went to LMU because I didn't want to go too far away from home. Didn't really feel grown up to do that yet.
Yeah, sure.
After LMU, first off, at LMU, I studied business management. So already came from a business background. And then I was also student body president there, like I already said. Okay. And so both of those things for me in terms of stakeholder management and business, I just really thought that consulting would be a great outlet for me.
Right.
So I started in consulting, eventually moved over to EY and was a consultant there for a little under 5 years.
Okay.
Given some change over that way.
Yeah.
And then I was based in Los Angeles. And sure, I was traveling, but it was also during the pandemic too, where I wasn't traveling as much.
Yes.
Yeah, I was based in Los Angeles. So I was flying up into Seattle for a good 2.5 years, actually, back and forth, just with a global family foundation. Had the best time there. They ended up writing my rec letters for school, which was super great.
That's great.
And yeah, that was my life to this point. But all those types of things, I was a West Coast boy through.
Right.
So I honestly, when I was thinking about going back to get my MBA, yes, it was a professional decision. I mean, I studied business. I was in the consulting world where people always talked about MBAs.
Right.
But it was also a very personal decision for me, just because you're taking 2 years off of school. But I also wanted to see more. I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. I wanted to experience more growth. And that's why when I decided to apply for MBA programs, I casted a wide net of West Coast, East Coast, and the Midwest schools.
Can I really want to emphasize something that you noted earlier, but just to put an exclamation point on it. Going to Loyola Marymount University, certainly a wonderful university, but I think there's a perception that everyone must go to Harvard to get into Harvard. And there are 900 students or 950 students, and I think about 320 schools represented. And every year there's a school that people have never heard of that's represented. So hopefully this gives some people who are watching or listening some inspiration to know that ultimately it's outcomes and impact and interesting lives lived and impact your professional world, and that you can get there from here.
I think my favorite thing actually is when an LMU student reaches out to me with even the desire to go to HBS.
Right.
I don't even think when I was at LMU, I had the desire to go to HBS.
Right.
I knew I wanted to go back to school already just because I was like, wow, I'm going to miss undergrad and all the fun things that went along with that. But I don't think I was keyed in on I have to go to HBS, I have to go to GSB, I have to go to Wharton. I don't think that ever crossed my mind.
Yeah.
So when I get messages from LMU students currently, it makes me super happy. I hope they do. Right. And one thing I will say just about the admissions process generally for me, and one thing that I was super comforted by, is how much weight I perceive they put on your essays. Because you're able to just share so much in a way that, for the longest time, I know HBS doesn't ask this right now anymore, but the what else should I know about you?
Right.
I think they put so much weight and stock into that. I mean, because if they didn't, I come from a non-target school that otherwise, so how do you reconcile that?
Right. As well as this notion here, okay, essays are not trivial to write. You had to write a lot of them. Obviously. Yeah. So how did that go? How does one even do that?
Can I just do a little math? You got you got 11 schools, let's say, averaging 3 essays or something like that, averaging, say, 5-6 drafts. You do the quick math. That's an awful lot of time in addition to a busy schedule. I mean, you must have really... I don't want to jump too far ahead, but you must have really been quite organized and diligent about this process.
I felt like I was organized. I also think, so I applied round 1 in 2022. I think it was. Because I started school in 2023, so that makes sense. I applied round 1 in 2022. I probably got more serious about it in April. So I had like a 5-month swing. And so that's when I got really serious.
Had you taken your GMAT or GRE before that?
I took the GRE. I had taken it once during the pandemic just to have a score. But then I ended up retaking it when I was talking to Krista, and she's like, oh, you should get it up a little bit more. I'm not the best test taker, full disclosure. I think I was I was definitely below the average for most of the schools that I applied to.
Again, you're continuing to inspire. We got LMU, which is, again, I'm not trying to, it's just not, I think what people think is is a feeder.
We have to acknowledge that.
Potentially, we're acknowledging a slightly below average GRE. Okay, and you come from consulting, and again, not McKinsey, right?
Well, it's not McKinsey, and it's not even EY Parthenon. I worked in people consulting at EY, and I loved my time there. It's everything that I wanted to do then. And all the things, I feel like, even from the firm that I was at, completely not the target. I mean, I see tons of people who worked at EY in my class, but they're all EY Parthenon.
So at the risk of making you immodest before the camera here, so what is it about you that popped that you think really stood out to the admissions committee?
So the funny thing, I remember telling Krista this at the very beginning. I was like, I want to start my whole thing with my HBS essay. And she's like, I don't know if I would recommend starting with HBS. I was like, no, like I'm going to do this because I totally can. I think for the longest time, I think one of the reasons why I was able to write so many essays is because I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about. And for me, the whole theme of my essay was on inclusive leadership. And so the way that my HBS essay read, and tons of people on TikTok ask me all the time, like, can you read your essay? Can you post this? I love talking about it, but I don't think it's something I'll ever share broadly. Just because I'm
sure it's, very personalized.
It's personalized, but I also want everyone to dig deep for them and what that means.
It's not illustrative for someone else.
Completely.
You're your own, everyone's their own snowflake. Like everyone, you can't, there are two people who are the same. I can't adopt your story and make it mine.
Totally. And what worked for me is not going to work for someone else because it's the whole package, right? It's test scores plus essay plus recommendation letters plus et cetera. And I knew that because of my test scores and not coming from maybe the most target institution, I need to put more weight and stock into my personal statement. And I also felt confident about it. And so when I think about my background growing up as a multiracial gay man and then tying that into all the different leadership opportunities that I've had, whether it's student body president at LMU, whether it's being chief of staff to the managing partner of my office at EY, and then highlighting 2 examples from each of those times of ways in which I've helped build inclusive community specifically and how that's made me comfortable with my own identity. I felt like I had a pretty strong story, to be very honest. And I think that because, honestly, with Krista, so for the longest time, I knew exactly what I wanted to write about. I would actually go about my day. I looked at all of the 11 schools that I wanted to apply to and their essay prompts. And then I also would on my phone notes being like, I want to talk about this position or this experience that I had with it, this thing that I did. I would just have this running list on my phone notes of things that I want to hit on if it makes sense to tie the thread. And so I had this body. And then when I talked to Krista about it, Krista was the most helpful in tying it all together. And pulling threads where they needed to be, making sure that you make the readers able to make a stronger connection between what I said in paragraph 1 and 3, the transitions much stronger. So Krista added so much value in that way to really hit my theme home.
No, I think that's right. And I think as good consultants, what we really try to do is it's your responsibility to get sort of all the dots out there. Every piece of your life, whatever form it takes, no matter how big or small you think the dot is. I know I'm screwing up this analogy, but you know what I mean? But our job as consultants is to connect the dots. You're a human person, some messiness in there, obviously not some linearity. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. But at the end of the day, you need someone to really, I believe you need somebody who really pull back and say, okay, now I understand Hayden, how everything connects.
And she did. And we were doing that. And there were so many times where she was like, I would tease this out. Or I would do this, or did you feel this way? And then it was super collaborative too. It's not like I'm taking direction blindly either. I would say, no, I don't feel super about this, but how about this? And we would do that together.
Right.
And that was a huge value add to me in my application process.
So are there any pieces that we're missing here? We've got you were I imagine it helped with being a president of your college.
Yeah.
And you got a few promotions at EY. I saw that.
I was a pretty young manager, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was like a consultant to senior consultant to manager. I had the best time at EY.
Right. Yeah. Strong student, presumably, good grades.
It was like my GPA, unlike my test scores, were above the average.
Okay,
so
there we go.
I will say I'm thinking, patting back my undergrad self for doing that and not completely coasting.
Any specific leadership outside the office that you showcased? Or
The funny thing is, no, I really didn't. I think, and when I got to the extracurricular or community part of the application, any of the applications, what you did outside
they always
of it,
have it,
I didn't have much outside of the roles, the extracurricular roles I had within the firm.
Yes.
And I think that was advice that I got early on that was okay. I think what I've realized too is that these programs just want to see impact.
Right.
We talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
That specific word,
Yeah.
like it's the impact. It's not the time served.
It's not the time served.
It's the impact.
It's not what it is. It's the impact.
Yes.
And I think I was able to quantify and add light to those impacts that I made.
I assume you had some validation, whether that was recommender, and of course the fact you were promoted so early, and as well as other people just recognizing the value that you provided.
And also, in the short time that I've known you, you're talking about in your essays, you're saying basically around like building communities.
Yeah.
And it's very clear you're a community builder. Like you weren't fudging this. This was very sincere and true to who you were. Like you're a president where you go. You build communities. This is. I think sometimes people say like, well, what should my theme be? As if there's like a correct theme.
That's
like,
right.
Okay, Harold, your theme should be
Exactly.
servant
The
leadership.
brand of Hayden.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the brand.
And
exactly.
I would be concerned not to talk about things that are genuine to me,
Right.
especially now having gone through 11 MBA interviews for all the programs. I remember all of them like they were yesterday.
That is so terrific.
Like, especially the HBS one where they're like, tell me about this one thing that you did when you were 10 years old that you mentioned this one sentence in your application.
Right.
If I'm lying about that, I'm screwed.
Yes,
Like, so
absolutely.
it needs to be real.
Absolutely. Deer in headlights.
They can sniff those things out.
Yeah, I'm sure they can. And I think applicants don't quite realize that admissions examiners, this is what they do. They do it every day. They're now in the world of ChatGPT in particular, they're looking for authenticity. They're really looking to get to know you, the real you. There's no sense blowing any smoke. So you'll see right there.
So those 11, I want to go back to this 11. I think it's going to blow the mind. Were they all first round?
They were all first round.
Okay, first round.
Wow.
I applied to every single one of them in round one.
Wow.
That is really amazing.
That is
really
something.
amazing. Particularly, I'm sure there's always these one-off essays that simply do not exist at other schools.
Yeah.
It's really sort of
those were. I will say that the way that I structured my HBS essay was like I always mispronounce the word vignettes.
Yeah, vignettes,
in like one bigger story.
Yes.
So I remember vividly for like a school like Kellogg that has like a few separate ones.
Yeah.
You're able to like pluck a little vignette.
That's right.
Or like the GSB has 3 optional essays if they still do at the end of like, what is it, like impact.
Yes.
I was like, okay, 1, 2, 3, bum.
You have to have a very organized way of thinking about it. And you have to have a good partner too, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is if you're applying to a bunch of schools, eventually you reach a critical mass where you've developed and refined your ideas. And like, maybe you got lucky with one where you actually could copy and paste, but a lot of times it's just like, okay, well, this idea it's thoughtful, it's developed, and it needs to be a little shorter, and there needs to be a different spin, but I know what I want to say fundamentally. I know who I am, and I know what I want to say.
Well, because my brand of inclusive leadership, I think, was so consistent, that became easy to talk about for every school.
Right.
And to be honest, if a school does not value that, I also didn't care about
That's
getting
not for you.
it,
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you want to learn more about your target business schools? Check out On Track by mbaMission, where we have in-depth modules on all the top business schools, covering everything from what makes them unique to how to tackle the application essays and short answers, and so much more. You can also practice for interview and video questions, all done on your schedule, on demand. We appreciate your dedication to our podcast, and we want to offer you 30% off any On-Track subscription. Use the code MBAMPOD to get 30% off any On-Track subscription. Check it out at ontrack.mbamission.com.
How did you think about each school? And again, 11 schools.
Yeah.
So this notion here of, were you treating them all like they were one school, or were you really getting into the nuts and bolts of each individual school?
And I'm gonna add on to that because it's part of the same thing.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I think maybe you said this. Like, were you Was HBS, was it a toss-up, or was it like, if I get into HBS, I'm going to go, or was there like critical evaluation as you were getting in?
Yeah. I think growing up as a West Coast boy, I really wanted to go to the GSB. I mean, Stanford just, it's a West Coast thing. I wanted to go. I never applied for undergrad. I thought it would be a really great opportunity. And I mean, I think the stats also, people are enamored by those.
Yes.
Like it's
absolutely.
really easy to get caught up in the acceptance rate and et cetera, and the rankings that exist. All of them out there, right? And especially right now of how the rankings have looked in recent years, which I also don't think people should necessarily always put the most stock in because I think it's what works for them, right? So honestly, for the longest time, I was like, the GSB would be a great fit for me. I could stay on the West Coast. I've been up in LA my whole time at that point, right? And then I think throughout the application process, I think I matured a little bit personally, and I think that I let myself explore more. So I think, one, I had the most positive experiences with every single person from HBS up to like throughout the application process, whether that was the Pride Club reaching out to me for mock interviews once I had gotten it, people having informational interviews with me. After getting an interview, HBS admissions pair me with an alumni mentor, whether it's, and then me getting in, or me going to admitted student weekend, them giving me extra tender love and care because they know that I hadn't committed up into that point. Them giving me like someone who used to be in like the Obama administration to talk to me, like giving me random calls to go. You know, like I felt so loved. And I also think that I realized that I wanted to move coasts and do something radically different. So when I got into both GSB and HBS and I had that decision up close and personal, I mean, it kind of became, do I want to do this now or never? Because I don't think that I would have ever made the choice to move coasts if it wasn't for school in a way that I had a community built in right away. But also I say these things of like I think it's easy to reduce to like the HBS GSB decision. I had 9 other great schools that are all incredible too. Like I fell in love with Tuck. I fell in love with Kellogg. I think that those would have been great places for me to go. Honestly, I had really great experiences from the interview. I had great experiences visiting Kellogg. So I think that those would have been fantastic too.
Was there any other school that was as aggressive in its outreach as HBS was? That was really trying hard to win you over and connecting you and all those things?
Yeah, I think that the GSB also definitely gave their fair chance.
Were they aware that you've been accepted to both?
So
because they get hyper competitive when they're aware.
No, and you feel that. So I think when you tell them that you're on the defense about or who you're talking to and it's the other one, they'll definitely deploy a lot more resources onto you.
I bet they did.
And it was a really stressful time. I think that, and I talk to now, we affectionately call ourselves the dual admits. It just
and it's a very small universe of people. I mean, our experience has been it is actually quite rare to have somebody accepted HBS and accepted GSB because again, they're different schools.
I feel like they're different people. I have so many friends at the GSB now who I met through admit weekends and just catch up with generally, and I feel like people end up where they're supposed to, and that's great. I will say, in my decision though, that was those. Especially because round 1, you get into the beginning of December. I vividly remember I was up in Seattle and I got a phone call from a Palo Alto area code. I was like, well, this is it. Here we go. And it was the first acceptance that I got of my 11.
That's really, really exciting. That's really, really exciting.
And it was the first one that I had gotten. And I was like, this is actually insane. And then I got into HBS later that week. And I was like, this is also insane. But then after that, admitted student weekend isn't until beginning of February. And because round 1, there's so much time. Round 2, it's very quick turnaround, which that would have stressed me out. I don't know if I would have been able to do round 2. But so from beginning of December to beginning of February, I was so stressed. Because every single person tells you, and I guess this is like a reminder to everyone out there that don't tell someone this if they get into both. I understand the sentiment, but it doesn't feel this way. Like, you can't go wrong either way.
Exactly. We have that a lot, and not just HBS versus GSB. I mean, the reality is one great school against another great school. It is incredibly stressful. It is.
I have people call me, and I will pick two other schools, but say like, "Oh, I'm in at Columbia, I'm in at Chicago," like, and really stressed out about it. I'm like, it's not like, I mean, there is some truth to that. Like, it's not like one leads to riches and happiness, and the other one leads to destitution and misery.
Yeah,
you're likely gonna be fine. You know, and there likely is some confirmation bias.
Right.
And I don't want to challenge you too much, Hayden, but I would guess that if you went to the GSB,
I would
you'd
be
be sitting
super
there going
happy.
like, I loved it. It was great.
I would have been super happy. I always tell people, I think that I would have had incredible experience at both schools. They're both incredible schools. I love all my friends at the GSB. The GSB was super great to me. I would have had a great time there.
Yes.
I think that I felt like that heart flutter at HBS though.
Right.
And we go for admitted student weekends, at least in round one, back-to-back weekends. So I remember the end of January, I went to the GSB, had a great time.
Yeah.
And then that week waiting for Boston on Thursday to get there, I was like, oh, I'm scared. What if I have a really good time too?
But
I think when I came to HBS, it was pretty clear what I needed, what I wanted to do.
I mean, so let's pause here, actually, Hayden. GSB versus HBS. So what were you thinking? I mean, what was the feel? How were the people different? I mean, what sort of experiences were you anticipating?
So one thing that I tell people now, because I think a very common question I get on TikTok is, how do you decide between both schools? And like people DM me, like, I'm in this position. I saw that you were, like, what did you do about it? I think offhand, my decision was personal to me because I ultimately decided that I wanted to move coasts.
Right.
And that's not something the GSB could fix.
Right.
I think that two things that really stand out to me of reasons why I'm glad that I chose HBS. And again, like you said, if I chose GSB, I'm sure I could come up with reasons why I'm glad I chose GSB, right? So like no shade to them whatsoever.
Right.
I think it's an incredible school.
Right.
I literally like that HBS has a residential campus.
Yes.
And its own campus.
Right.
And I think that we don't talk about that enough.
Right.
Stanford's campus is obviously gorgeous.
Yep.
They share with all of their schools and et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. But I'm from Boston. I lived in Boston. I went out to visit Stanford at this point a number of years ago. I'm like, I can't believe people go to school here.
No, it's incredible.
It was like,
and it's so California, and that like deeply resonates with me.
Right.
I think I love that HBS has its own campus, though. I love walking around our campus, knowing that everyone, for the most part, unless it's like an exec ed person, is an MBA student.
Right.
They're either in my class or the class below me.
Right.
Because it's just our campus, right? And I lived also in the dorms, or I live in the dorms right now.
I was going to ask you where you live. Yeah.
So I'm live in the heart of the action.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm feet away from said CEO panel in Harmon Hall, or I'm able to get to our mixer events with section I later that night because I'm on campus, right? So it's just so much easier. And community. And when we talk about my essay being community, like that deeply resonates with me. The second thing I'll say is that I like the HBS class size of 900.
Okay.
And I think the easiest comparator, but both of them, they're like, well, if you want to go to a big school, go to HBS. If you want to go to a small school, go to GSB.
Right.
I don't believe in that distinction.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Because I think that you can also make a big school small.
I agree with you.
For sure.
And especially because HBS has sections.
Right.
Especially in your first year. You have 10 sections of 90 students each, give or take. And so compare that 400 at the GSB or whatever that number is to actually like the 90 of your RC section your first year at HBS.
Yeah.
There's so many ways to slice and dice it.
Yeah.
I really liked the 900 person.
I have this, what I usually say to folks as they're thinking about bigger schools, Wharton in particular, I say to them, listen, it's big enough to be small. The reality is at a smaller school, you go to the wine club, you then go to the beer club, you then go to the cocktails club, and it's exactly the same people, right? As opposed to a place with a very big school, it's like wine club is different from beer club. And suddenly you have these like little small communities, but you're in 3 of them or 4 of them, 5 of them, rather than just one at a small school.
Let me ask you this. I mean, if you're 950 odd,
How many do I know?
Yeah.
Okay, so I get this question all the time from my own classmates.
Yeah.
I get it probably like every other day. If I run into one of my classmates,
That's
I'll be like,
fantastic.
how many people do you know? Honestly, probably well over 75%.
Yeah.
Like I was actually looking in my negotiations because I was just not bored.
Yeah.
Sorry, HBS.
No,
Like,
never.
I was
I was
in class earlier today, and interestingly, so your second year, your EC year, you're in your elective courses, and your whole first year you take with your section. So you're with the same 90 odd people for every single class. And then EC year, it opens up, so it's like mixed. So I'm looking at my negotiations class. There's like 60 people in it. I was just kind of dazing. I was like, how many people, this is literally today, how many people in here sections do I know? I knew 55 of the 60.
Okay.
Of like what's, not only their names, but what section they were in their RC year.
Right.
But I think that I also know so many people, I don't want to say that like it's a common thing at HBS, probably know 75% of people. I think people definitely obviously get to know their 90 people in their section incredibly well.
Right.
You can't not. Like you're spending your whole first year together and all your social activities, the educational experience, which I think is so positive. We should talk more about the section experience. But also, you do mix with other sections.
Yes.
Whether it's clubs, whether it's section mixers, whether you went on pre-MBA trips. I also think that I know a lot more people generally just being student body president.
Sure.
And then also planning some of our class's biggest trips. So that's just helped me get to know people.
Were there any schools, not HBS or GSB, that you just liked, that were exciting to you, that you felt, maybe even you felt they were different from everybody else?
Tuck.
Okay.
I think there's something about their community that just felt special to me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of, I know I was just harping on like the big thing.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something how small it is and how, can I say how remote,
how remote it is. Yes, absolutely.
Like that you're not distracted by a big city. You actually just focus on each other. So I thought there was something really special about
And it's the only thing they're teaching there, right? So they've got their MBA. There aren't part-timers coming through. There aren't executive MBAs coming through. And so the focus is solely on 240 people
that's really cool.
tucked away. It's very compelling.
So that was really
and
cool.
And it's beautiful around there. And if you like the outdoors, it's beautiful.
I mean, I hadn't been to the Northeast really until coming to HBS.
Right. And there's nothing more Northeast feeling than Hanover, New Hampshire, right?
No, 1,000%. And so I would say that one stood out to me generally. Believe it or not, I never visited Wharton. I still haven't. I would love to. Because I think that could have been a really fantastic option too. I will say, I do still like the GSB. So I want that for GSB listeners. Let it be known. I would have had a fantastic time there.
That's great.
I would have still loved the GSB. I just made the decision that was right for me.
Let's talk about sections. What was your experience in terms of the section, the people in your section?
I think two things. The first is that I think section is fun because you are with them constantly. You learn to love people for who they are. And so I love my classmate who worked at Ford before school, and every single comment in every class, whether it's accounting or leadership or marketing, it's always related to Ford. I know it's coming, right? So, but you learn about so much about people and how they view the same case and the same problem at hand from their lens in a very different way that I come from most things coming from people consulting with a very big talent perspective. Right. My classmates love to joke, RC year, everything I would say is, for me, from a talent perspective, I would just go that way. But you learn to appreciate people for who they are. And then I also think that the section, it's its own community in itself. Like in a very similar way, I'm student body president now. Before that, I was president of my section. And I still am. And that's like a for life position.
Yes.
Right.
That's great.
And so we have our council of 15-ish people who keep the section running. And I think to your point of people just being different, you can still build a really inclusive community with those differences. And I think that that's why I wanted to be section president too, to help nurture that, because I believe in that so strongly.
Going to that admit weekend, and I know you said that it was important to you to be president. Was this already part of a little bit of a campaign? You're like, I'll win over people already that early. Were you already being particularly social and meeting people? I know that's probably your style as well.
I mean, here's the thing. I love people. And so I was super excited to start. And then I also think that in the very beginning, and I think that the MBA program is no different from just social things generally, people love being included. People want things to do. People want to be invited to do things. And I think that social pressure, which could be super negative, but also can exists in a very positive way. It's no different than the MBA program.
No, and I have to tell you something. It's one of the few experiences in your life where you can actually become friends with somebody who's much different from you. I mean, honestly, most of us sort of live in our own little microcosms, and then you're only friends with, you know, tall
neighbor,
people with dark hair, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're friends with, I was friends with an Olympic athlete who won the head of the Charles Lee. I was there.
That's sick.
It's like, that's so awesome.
See, that's really cool. I mean, I have so many section mates, and like, for example, one of my classmates, Darren, he's one of my best friends, like flew the last helicopter out of Afghanistan. Like that's insane.
Right. Yeah,
like knowing those types of people.
Yeah.
You're gonna skew the entire podcast because I'm playing towards the Hayden did a lot of basic unremarkable things extraordinarily well, and we're like, but then when people hear like, oh my God, flew the last minute of Afghanistan, people are like, I'm never going to be able to do that.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
So, but he's there. But he's there.
He
so it's only fair.
Right.
But I will say too, to your point of just meeting new people, I tell people all the time that and you probably have the international percentage of HBS off the top. I don't have it.
Right.
But so we should add that to whatever we have it. But my section is the most global community I have been, and I probably ever will be a part of.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, I think last year in my section, almost 50% of the people were non-US domestic.
That's so interesting.
And so I've met so many people from countries where I've never met people from before, which I just think is really an interest. It's one component of diversity is global and where you come from. But I just think it's an interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if I understand correctly, you just got back from Saudi Arabia.
I did.
Yeah. So again, not necessarily a country to think about as sort of the vacation spot.
Which is really cool because we have classmates from all these countries. So when I think about going to Oktoberfest with my classmates our German classmates took us to Oktoberfest this past October. I went to Saudi Arabia in December with some of my Saudi classmates.
So when I got to business school, I was a new married and obviously had sort of different constraints on my schedule. So how were other people, Hayden, people that you know who quote look like me or maybe have young children, how did they engage in the community?
That's a great question. I mean, when I think about the section and I think about even just the positions that we have on our section leadership team, like we have someone who represents the partner community in our section. We have someone who represents the family community within our section. Because to our point, just about the diverse people that exist within a 90 odd person section, you have so many different people like that, right? So we have had section mates who have had babies. We have section mates who have kids who are like 8 years old, all across the board. And I think my job as section president was to ensure that most things, you can't always be 100%. That you strive for more, right? But to be inclusive of a lot of those populations. And I mean, there are so many great affinity clubs at HBS, like I'm sure there are most schools who are super proactive in trying to make sure families are included, partners are included. And I think that now, as student body president, I actively try to think about ways to make our events and staple things more inclusive to those communities as well.
No, that makes sense.
You've got 4 months left. Like this thing is just breezed by.
Please don't remind me. Let's cut here.
Exactly.
like you're given a do-over. What? I mean, are you doing anything differently? It sounds like you've really lived this experience.
I've accomplished everything that I want to do here.
That's awesome. I mean, it's very rare you can say that about anything in life. Seriously,
I did.
Any stint that you can say, I wouldn't change it. That's incredible.
I came in, I wanted to make really great friends, and I did that. I have some of my best friends that, to be very honest, I couldn't imagine my life without now.
And that's great.
I also wanted to get involved in student government. And I did both of those things. And I've always been really open and honest about those things. If there's one thing that I wish I did differently, and it's an additive, I wish I wrote things down more. And I think that I'm realizing that now. I would have loved to have kept a journal that helps me. On January 22nd, I was feeling this way during my RC year in my dorm, and I was writing this. Like, I would have loved to have done that. So that would have been one thing. But
you do have pieces of that through your TikTok.
I was just going to say the exact same thing.
I do. I have documented a lot of those pieces on TikTok.
Let's give you an ad. It's at Hayden Tanabe.
At Hayden Tanabe.
Okay.
It's my first name and last name put together.
That's great.
HaydenTanabe on all platforms. It's been really fun looking back on a lot of those memories. I think some of my Because I think that sometimes and you'll never experience something until you're actually there.
Right.
But so much of the experience can be kind of a black box and not knowing exactly what's there.
Absolutely.
So I remember one of my first videos actually, well, first off, people were really curious about Yacht Week. But when I got to HBS, one of my first videos was about section reveal, which is a day when we all move in during our start week, which is just when we get acclimated to school. One morning you wake up, 7 o'clock in the morning, people gather. You open your phone to see what section letter you are, A through J, and what it is. And I had documented that experience on my TikTok.
That's great.
And people are just so intrigued. They ask so many questions about it.
Right.
And you're like humanizing that a little bit
That's
for
that black box.
Because something like HBS or any MBA program can be so distant to some people.
Yeah.
And it,
For sure.
TikTok democratizes that a lot. I think.
I always say to people when they're going to interview, they say, well, should I go to the class beforehand? Is that going to make me antsy or nervous? And I'm like, I think the best reason to go to a class beforehand, to spend the day on campus is to humanize the experience, to look around and go, yeah, these are normal people. Like, yes, occasionally you get the individual who's the last helicopter to leave Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of other, just generally speaking, very nice, high-achieving people.
Right.
My section mates and classmates are some of the silliest, my big thing usually is that it's just not that deep and serious.
Right.
It doesn't have to be.
Right.
You can also, we take the things serious that we need to.
Right.
Go to class, take academics seriously, behave in a professional way.
Right.
That doesn't mean you can't be a real person too.
Right.
And I think that's
right.
one thing that I've really appreciated at HBS and why I think they do admissions incredibly well.
Yes.
My classmates are all real people.
Yeah.
We have fun. We go out on the weekends. We have
That's great.
great trips together,
Great. So Hayden, obviously you know 75% of your classmates. Tell me about sort of maybe a parallel experience or what you've seen from other friends as far as what the highlights of their experience has been and really those things that may have been almost to the point of being transcendent for them.
I think that the section experience is one of the most universally loved things at HBS.
Okay.
And I think we talk about it a lot and you can read it on our website and online.
Right.
But I don't think people understand how much of a differentiator it is to the experience.
Okay.
And especially compared to other schools.
Yeah.
I know other schools group students and for a variety of different things, but to my understanding, you would correct me if I'm wrong, like HBS is the only school that has a first year experience where the entire thing
That's right, the whole first year. Yep.
It's not, I don't think it's the only one. Oh, you know what, you're right. Some of the other schools,
some are
Dartmouth
one semester.
Tuck have introduced a couple of electives at the end. You're right. I think you're right.
And I think that integrating into the community from
That's right.
You're in the classroom with these people, you have pre-games together for your biggest events. Like, for example, for our upcoming spring gala, every single one of the sections will have a pre-game just together before the gala.
Yeah.
Like, your section is kind of like your homeroom, like in middle school or high school, where it's your home base.
Yeah.
Even once your first year is done.
Okay.
You have so much comfort going into your class, knowing everyone who's there.
Right.
And also a buffer for you to always have when you're also meeting other people.
That's right. It's not the new kid at junior high. It's like you walk in there, all these eyes are staring at you. Yeah.
I have a very close friend who's an HBS grad who is going back to his reunion for a milestone reunion.
Yeah.
And one of his section mates is doing, like they're so close to the section still that one of his section mates is doing just a brief podcast with every single member of the section just to give people a little bit of a warm up before they, I think that's so nice.
And every section's unique and as it should be.
Right. So you're saying they each take on their own personalities.
They all take on their own personalities.
Right.
HBS does a good job, I think, in diversifying the section of making sure students from countries are like evenly distributed and the gender balance and all those types of things. But I think it's up to each section to set their own values and norms at the beginning of the year and then live those values throughout. I think it's really important.
Right.
And I think that experience is just universally positive. I think even when we get to EC or second year, we still look for those opportunities to get with our section. And I think when I love that example because as section president, section I, to be clear.
Okay, there we go. I heard much better than J, though H was really...
I was thinking about it. I was like, I need to plug my section. I'm section I, very proud of that.
Yeah.
And I even think about when we have our 1 year reunion, our 5 year reunion, and the types of things I do outside of that, how to preserve that special section culture even beyond HBS.
Right.
the section's special.
Yeah.
And I think that is one thing that helps students feel comfortable right away at HBS, and then also feel comfortable to branch out because they know they have the section to lean on.
No, absolutely.
So I mean, we're talking about the section experience. We've talked about, we've talked all the way about your journey into the school, how much you've enjoyed the community, your section experience, and more. I mean, it's safe to say this experience has exceeded your expectations.
Yeah.
In what ways? I mean, what are the upside surprises in this experience?
Ooh, I think so. We talk a lot about breadth and depth.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that gets associated with friendships.
Yeah.
I originally wanted to come in and meet a ton of people.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Right.
I'm also walking away, and I already said this with some of my best friends that I couldn't imagine my life without.
Right.
But I don't think I fully expected to get the level of depth of friendships that I have.
No, that's interesting. Yeah. Meaning, because HBS, there's this stereotype here, and I have to be honest with you, in terms of everything is transactional.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be friends with Jeremy just because I know Jeremy is going to be doing mbaMission consulting. My son wants to go to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You always think about transactional, and I think what you're saying, the exact opposite is happening.
I mean, a lot of my experiences with my friends are things that are completely not even related to professional whatsoever,
Right.
And I think that just goes back to being whole people.
Yeah.
And I don't think I expected that. I also think that, I mean, just realistically, I came into the MBA program with the average age of 27.
Okay.
I think that's the average.
Yeah.
I think it's 5 years of experience.
Yeah.
It's around there.
Right.
And I think the desire for human and social connection is always so strong that I think it makes sense that I ended up getting a lot more than I bargained for with that.
No, that makes sense. How old are you now?
20. I just turned 29.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So again, maybe a little bit older, which I'm always been curious about the question is you're going to have some deferred applicants in your section.
That's true. That's
meaning folks who are like 24, 25 years old. I've always wondered, like, how do they interact with folks who are, potentially 5 years older?
Or is age even something you're aware of, like in that environment? Are you like, I felt like when I went to business school, I kind of looked around and I was like, oh, I didn't realize that person, I was one of the youngest members of my class. And oh, I didn't realize that person was my age. Like I sort of felt like everyone was ageless with the exception of like 4 people.
Right.
I think it's more so the experience that you talk about because with HBS being all case-based, which I think honestly too is a really unique differentiator for HBS to other programs.
Right.
I liked that it was unique in that way. It was all differentiated by being the case method. I mean, that you're specifically talking about your experience professionally before school.
Right.
And I think some people have a lot of it.
Yeah.
Some people don't have as much of it.
Yeah.
And that's okay because everyone's there for a reason. I think one thing that we always say to our admits, and admitted student weekend was a few weekends ago, and I got to speak in Carmen to all the admits, and every single person's there for a reason. You're more than your resume. You're more than your essay.
Right.
And so they're all there for a reason.
Yeah.
I think some people definitely do bring varying levels of professional experience too.
Right.
And also different things. Like some classmates have done the trifecta of consulting, private equity, and tech. And I'm like, wow, you come in with a lot of experience.
Right.
I was just consulting for 4.5 years, right? So it's just different.
Right.
Even with me being the average age, it's also all different.
Right. No, I can appreciate that.
Maybe that's
we'll listen
to wrap.
I think so.
What a journey.
Absolutely.
Amazing stuff.
Congratulations on your HBS experience. Congratulations on graduating. And
thank you.
Yeah. Listen, wishing you all the luck going forward.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It'll be fun. My family will come out.
Yeah.
I don't love the idea of leaving, but I'll get excited about it gradually.
I can appreciate that, definitely.
Well, here's to hoping that with the remaining few months, there are no regrets. You live it up to the fullest.
I hope so.
Absolutely. No, really fun stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.